Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back, guys. Today we are giving you an update on Notre-Dame. I know you're dying to know what's going on. When can you visit? And today we're going to break it down into two parts. So it'll be 2 episodes. We'll do inside and outside, and I'll let Claudine take it from here.
Yeah, so we are just a little over 4 months out until we are back inside Notre Dame, and I cannot wait. I've been getting a lot of questions from people asking how they get tickets. There won't be tickets. It's a church. It's free. There won't be tickets. But as that news and information comes out about what's it going to be like to get back in, we will definitely be sure to share it. But there's so many great things happening, and we wanted to, the last time we did an update was in April on the 5-year anniversary. So we thought it was time for another little update, and I found some really fascinating things about what has been going on. So this is all going to be about the outside because, of course, I found way too much things that I have to share, and so it would just be way too long. So we'll do the inside a little bit later. But what has been completed, and if you have been here in the last month or so, it's really exciting because the roof is back. So the silhouette of Notre Dame is back, and we could see it, and we could see the spire and the ridge line and everything, and it's almost like it was never gone.
This is huge. I've been seeing the updates from your window, your apartment window.
Yeah, well, when I go up to water the plants, and I'm taking care of my friend's monster cat and watering his plants. And he has a view right up over there of I could see it. So I love doing that. But we're talking about the roof. So what has been done in April, we had at that point, the rafters had gone in, but now everything's covered. So when they put the pieces of the roof, all of those things were done off-site out in Normandy and brought up the river. And then they would just basically pick them up by a crane and lower them in place and set them. Then once those were done, they actually also added these 2 on either side of the spire down below. They added what they called fire stop. And these things are probably a good 5 or 6 feet wide. And it's all a steel. So it looks like the same kind of rafters that go up and down, but it's done in steel. And so these are supposed to be fire stops. So if the fire is coming, it's going to slow down because it's not going to burn the metal like it's going to burn the wood. So they also are adding in a state-of-the-art sprinkler system and new electricity, everything. So it's basically going to be a brand new 860-year-old cathedral.
Brand new. I like
brand new. 860 years. So once they put the rafters up, they put this oak, these basically sheets of oak down. And this specific oak that they use, I thought this was really interesting. That's a special one that has its anti-acidity. So when it will not oxidize the lead sheets that go on. So they put craft paper on top of that, and then they'll lay the sheets of lead. So in January 2024 was where they completed the rafters, and then they put in these ceremonial bouquets. And as I was giving tours around it, people would always say, "What is that thing up there?" Because it just once the plants died, it just looked like this big wad of something high up. And so that's always kind of the ceremonial thing. They'll drop in one piece of like carved stone or wood, depending on what it is that they're doing when they complete that, and it has the date on it. And then they will leave a huge bouquet of flowers on there. So that was in January. There's 2,700 lead tablets. When you look at a roof, and I'm looking out my window at a roof right now and seeing all the pieces, they're pretty huge pieces, rectangular pieces. There's 2,700 of those on the roof. There's 71 ridge pieces. There's 4 dormer windows, 2 clocks, which have not been added back yet. And then there's 25 outlets to ventilate the roof. The entire roof that burned was the one designed by Viollet the Duke in the 19th century. So it had been up there a good 160 years or so. The nave itself is 50 meters long. So it's a massive amount of, so these lead sheets, they're cast in sand, and there is no longer anybody in France that does this. So they send them and have them made in England.
The horror.
I know. I'm not sure they'd be so happy if they knew, because the French and English still have these rivalries. But the sheets themselves are made in England. They bring them over here to France to Genevieve, and then each one of them one piece weighs 114 pounds, and those ridge details on the top that are molded are 551 pounds each.
Holy cow.
So massive. So when they have these done, they bring them up to Notre-Dame, and they immediately like put them in these baskets. And I've been there when I've watched them, and I've made videos of them where you could see them hoisting them up onto the roof, bringing him, dropping him onto the scaffolding, and then the workers are putting them all in place. They have copper tabs on them to affix it onto the roof. Then on the side of it, there's almost like a rolled and kind of funneled and rolled piece of it. So then they all kind of lock over each other on the sides. And then they bang it into place with mallets. So you want to make sure that it's very, very watertight, of course, because it's the roof. But they also have to keep in mind of like with the oxidizing and all of these other things they have to take into focus for it. On the backside in the choir, the apse, so that backside of the church that was rounded, there's 24 different sections because it is rounded, and it's in different shapes of trapezoids. So they just keep depending on how it goes up, because the bottom will be wider than the top. And so they all have these numbered, and they know exactly what they're doing. At the very top of that, just about 2 months ago, they added the cross back in there, and this cross is amazing. And I was so excited to see this because after the fire, I got here 4 days after the fire in 2019, and I saw the cross hanging off the edge of the roof. And so it luckily did not sustain the heat. And so it wasn't damaged. And so they were able to restore it. They worked for over 1,000 hours on this one cross, and then they had it put back. So they were able to completely redo the whole thing and use the original one. So it's the only original thing that was on the roof that will be back, that survived the fire.
That's pretty epic to consider that's the only thing that survived.
The only thing. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So a little bit more about the other things on the roof. There is, of course, the spire, and we talked about the spire back in April, but I've learned a few other things. So all the pieces that are on the spire, as far as the lead, those are all pre-shaped and molded in a workshop. In fact, 4 different workshops worked on it, and each one of them had a different mock-up of this. So basically, they made like 3 or 4 spires, because then they would send it to these different workshops, and depending on which one of them was working on which part, they would be able to completely mold it to the actual spire. And then they send them up to Paris, because what they also want to do is, because they were doing this in January and February of this year, they don't want to have these workers standing out there on that scaffolding and in the really, cold and rain for too long. And so they basically, the whole thing is like, Legos. And so they had all these pieces done offsite, bring them up to Paris, and just basically mold them on. One thing they had to keep in mind, though, was because this was more of a fresh cut, although this wood, even though they started cutting trees down in May of 2019, so just a month after the fire, that wood is not seasoned even in 5 years. There will be shrinkage of that wood, and they had to keep all of that in mind because you want to also keep everything watertight. And so they don't want to have, the nails and everything going in this and then that wood starting to shrink. So they had to keep all those things in mind with this. And I cannot imagine how many moving parts, and all my man, Philippe Villeneuve, he is in charge of all of it.
There's just so much to think about. I can't even imagine.
It is pretty amazing. The pieces of lead is thick and heavy, but it's also very unforgiving. So if you make a mistake and, they put the nail in the wrong place, they just basically have to throw that out. They can't redo it. They can't do anything to it. So they basically have to be very careful. So you have the best people, men and women, working on this that you could possibly have. On the spire itself, there's also 112 hooks. These are every 1.5 meters you go up. They kind of look like flowers bending down. They're also cast in lead. They're not spun lead, which was different, which is what Viollet-le-Duc did. They have made a few changes, like with the ridge line, the mold of that, instead of, because they had some pieces that survived the fire, some of them were very thick, some were very thin, they were very inconsistent. So this time they actually made a mold, and then they poured the melted lead into it. So all of them are the same. That's why also they're so heavy. There's also eagle owls on there. There's 8 eagle owls and 8 griffins that were done in wood and then covered with lead. And so that's all on the actual piece. So if you look at it right now, the scaffolding is completely down from the spire, and they had to take all of it down because the scaffolding for the spire literally went through the church all the way down to the ground. So that is 96 meters high is the spire. So it's just an insane amount. There was 600 tons of scaffolding alone. And so they had to take all that down because they are also doing the finishing the vaults and the transept inside. So they just redid that, and we'll tell you about the inside in a few weeks. But they had to take all of that down. And if you look at the spire now, the top of it, the thinner part, is all lead, covered in lead. But the lower side, that's called the open work, because you see these kind of open windows, that's still raw wood, because they need to put the scaffolding back up to do that. So they took everything down so they could finish the inside. After, in the fall, they'll put scaffolding back up to fix that. But all those pieces are already done and molded. All that lead is done. So it's not going to take them very long. Plus, then they also have to do the seatings to put the statues back up. And I don't know when they're going to put those 16 statues. I have not seen anything mentioned yet. But when I do know, I'll let you know, and hopefully I'll be there we could see it come, lower all those statues back in, which would be so exciting. But I imagine that's not going to be until late fall, unfortunately. But it's pretty amazing that they started all of this back just a year ago, because a year ago when I had my friend's balcony in August, and that's when they started building the spire and building all the scaffolding around it. And now a year later, there's the spire, and it's, practically done.
It's crazy because it feels like forever, but super fast at the same time.
I know now. I mean, literally, I remember looking up there going, oh my gosh, it's just so weird to see it without the roof. And now I see it, all the time. And I'm like, oh, like now it's normal. Like it's interesting how your mind and memories work that way, where you're like, oh yeah, now it's always been there. It's fine.
This is business as usual.
Yeah. So at the top of our spire is the rooster, of course, and I loved that rooster long before the fire. And nobody seemed to ever care about the rooster when I would share the stories online about the rooster and what's inside of it. But now everybody knows, and it's how I fell in love with Philippe. So Philippe, of course, he did not arrive. Philippe Villeneuve, if you've not listened before and have not placed the restraining order on me yet, Philippe Villeneuve is the head architect of Notre-Dame. He was put into the job in 2013, so thank goodness. He had that job 6 years before the fire, so already had a pretty intimate understanding with the church. He was not in Paris when the fire started. He was out in on the coast in Normandy, where he was overseeing a project. So he's just so scrambling to get a train to come back, which I can't even imagine how sick you had to be feeling if you were him and knowing that, Notre Dame's on fire. He arrived at about 11 p.m. that night on April 15th. The next morning, he went in with the firemen, and they went in, and he went up above and looked down. And from there, on the north side, in the rubble, in the middle of the church, in the transept, he noticed something, and it was the rooster. So the rooster was patinaed, it was green, but he noticed it, and he said, "I need to go in there." And they were like, "No, you can't go. It's too dangerous." And he's like, "I'm going anyway." And he did. He went in there and he got the rooster. And then I woke up the next morning, on the West Coast, and saw this picture of this man holding my rooster. And I was so excited. And that's when I fell in love. So he had the rooster, and he was worried what to do with it. So he had a friend that lives very close to Notre Dame, and he called him and took this rooster to his house for him to hold on to it for a little bit. I would die if I had the rooster. But what's really amazing about this is that Philippe said, when this happened, he said, "I won't feel like it's complete until we have the rooster back." And he is the one who designed the rooster. So in 2000 was when he first had the idea of what the rooster would be. In 2021, in April, he presented 2 ideas to the president, Macron, and he showed it to him. And one of them was an exact replication of the original rooster. And then another one was his take on that rooster. And his take on that rooster, for the little wings of the rooster, they'd be going up, and they'd be like like fire, like flame. So it's like a rooster, but it's like a phoenix rising from the ashes, which is pretty apropos and amazing. And Macron said, "Let's do that one." So what I love about this, and I just learned this when doing some research a couple of weeks ago, was the travels of this rooster. It's pretty amazing. So it was designed by Philippe. It was then created in battered copper by sculptor Henri Patrick Steen. It was then manufactured after that by the Diandre Clabot company in Belgium. It then was returned to the Tatler Arco. It was then, there is where they covered it with 4 layers of paint. And then it was sent to the Loire Valley, and it was gilded by the master Stéphane Roussel. And I saw a story about him months ago on the French news. This guy has gilded everything you could possibly think of that you see that's epic and amazing in France. Like, he gilded the top of Mont Saint-Michel. He's gilded tops of the Opera House. Like, he is the guy. And it's pretty amazing to see all the things that he did. It is covered with 22 karat gold leaf. Now, most of the buildings and everything that you see, including Versailles, none of that's real gold. The only thing that is the dome of Les Invalides. And I know how many times you've been so lucky to go up on top of that. But that's the only thing that actually has real gold. And my little rooster.
Wait, really?
Yeah. All the other ones, it's not real gold.
How tricky is that?
Yeah. And gilding, it's pretty amazing. So when he gets it, he paints it with 3 layers of linseed oil and turpentine. And then you have to let that sit for about 36 hours. And then he says that when you touch it and you could feel the love, exact quote, is when you know it's ready to be gilded.
Feel the love.
Feel the love. So, that's just part of my love story. If Philippe the rooster and I feel the love.
And restraining order.
And I've met him twice. I don't think he knows how much I love him. But the rooster is also a weather vane. So it actually also moves. But you know what else I learned? And I love this even more. So I saw when they lowered that baby down on December 16th, 2023. I had to be there. I waited outside. It was a clear day and sunny, but it was windy and it was so cold. And I was like, the last time somebody saw this was in like the 1860s. You better know that I am going to be there to watch it. And I did. And I waited and waited and waited. But what's really cool is the custom for this is the two youngest apprentices are the ones that are involved in this. So this young girl, Zoe Farrow, that works for Le Bras Frere company, she is the one, like she is the youngest person working there, and she is the one that actually got to lower in and attach it to the spire. Isn't that the coolest thing?
That is super fun.
So here's this like young girl that's like 21 years old, and she gets to be the one for, the hopefully the next 80 years telling everybody how she was the one who attached the rooster to the spire.
I mean, I bet we all want to be her secretly.
Oh, well, because I would have been really close to Philippe. Do you know that he has on his arm, he has a giant tattoo of the spire? And he says it actually comes in really handy because when he's talking to people, he could just point to it like, well, at this point, this is what we're doing. And he could just point and say, this is where it broke in two and snapped through the ceiling.
I love that. He is dedicated.
He is very dedicated. But a little bit more about the cross that I mentioned, that it was originally designed by Viollet-le-Duc. It's 42 feet. It was, as I said, it took 1,000 hours and 8 months for them to restore it. And it was also installed on May 24th, 2024. I was so excited to see that. But one of the other things that I wanted to share today was a little bit about the bell tower. And the bell tower in the belfry. So when you're looking at the church from the front and she looks completely normal and fine, the bell tower to the north, so the left-hand side, that is the North Belfry. And that is the one on the night of the fire that they basically said, we've got 20 minutes to save save the church, or she's going down, because the fire started getting closer to the belfry. The belfry inside of the stone tower is all wood. It did actually get inside. It burned the southeast corner of it a little bit, but luckily the brave pompiers got up there and were able to get it out. They were standing up there on the belfry and were able to put it out and save the whole thing, because if the fire got there and caught the belfry, and you have 8 massive bells in there that weigh tons and tons and tons, they would have just fallen and the whole entire facade of the church would have been destroyed.
Yeah, we have to really appreciate them. Like it would have been a whole different story.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to appreciate them.
I was looking at their calendar the other day. It's not as sexy as it used to
I know, they really toned it down. It's really sad.
Boring now.
So boring. Yeah, I know. They kind of got away from like the sex appeal of the firemen to like, I'm sitting at a desk working.
Yeah, like who wants this calendar?
Yeah, nobody wants that one. Sorry, guys. But what's really cool is, so they're restoring the north vault. The south vault is fine. The south tower, sorry. They're redoing the north one. And so what they're doing is they're going and they're checking all of this. And these are massive, massive beams. They're going and they're checking them. They're grafting new pieces onto them to make them more solid. But then they will also have to use a huge jack is going to have to raise it. It's 150 tons. They're going to have to raise it 30 centimeters so that they could restore and replace 3 large beams in it. Which
Wow.
that's crazy. They removed all the bells out of there last year. But what also I realized is really interesting, and I could look out my window and see Saint-Sulpice, so I could look right at these kinds of things while I'm talking about it. But the outside, if you look on the outside of a bell tower, especially Notre-Dame, you'll see like these louvers, and these are also made of lead. And so they are at a 45-degree angle. And what's really interesting is they protect the bells from bad weather. They ventilate the area, and it also helps to send the sound to the ground. Many of them need to be redone, so they took them out and they sent them to that same place in England. 80% of them could be melted down and actually recast, and so they'll come right back. So, they're doing their part of recycling. They're doing all of it. But I thought that was so interesting that they are lead, and then that's all their function. So as I said, the 8 bells that were there were removed in July 2023. 6 of them are okay, but 2 of them, the Saint Marcel and Saint Gabriel, they suffered thermal shock. And so they're basically being recast, and they're being redone at a place called Corny-Havard in the Manche region. They were the ones that created the 9 new bells in 2012 for the 850th anniversary. And we did an episode about that, like, oh gosh, year and a half ago, 2 years ago, which I'll put a link to. The 8 in the north and 1 in the south. In 2017, they restored Emmanuel, which is the biggest, called the Bourdon Bell. But I love that this is the same group that's redoing it. They also are going to replace all the electrical equipment in there. So they are redoing all of that, rewiring, refurbishing, and then putting all those pieces back in. They will do the South Tower as well after it opens. But the life of those bells, I was kind of surprised, is only 50 to 100 years.
Really? I thought that'd be a lot longer.
Well, the biggest, the Bourdon Emmanuel, it actually dates to the early 17th century, but because they can melt it down, recast it, and redo it, it's kind of using the same bell. But they don't, they use a bronze, it's with brass, and it's rich in tin, which is really good for the sound, but it's brittle and it easily chips. If there is a crack in one of the bells, they are so good that people that work on this, they could hear it when a bell, like literally right now, Saint-Germain-des-Prés, I could hear the bells at this very second, but they could actually hear like, oh, that's it. There's a chip in the, Saint-Marcel.
That's really interesting. I had no idea.
Because it would actually affect the sound of it. 2 motors are attached to each bell. One swings it and one controls how it strikes the bell. But they will all be installed and we'll be able to hear them on December 8th when it reopens. And one more little thing when you're looking up at the top, one of the things on the night of the fire, that everybody was like, oh my gosh, are the rose windows okay? And luckily, not a single piece of stained glass in that entire place was harmed. But a really exciting thing that's happened in the last few months is the north and south transept. Those whole arms have completely been revealed. So there's no more scaffolding on it. First was the south side. They redid the south side. But up at the very top, when you look at it now, you could definitely see what looks a lot lighter. That's the newer part. And so the pignons, what they're called, kind of the triangle shape at the top. And those were mostly restored, but the kind of more delicate elements were rebuilt. On the South Tower, at the very top of the pignon is Christ, and he's on either side of him is Saint Etienne and Saint Martin. Both the Saint Etienne and Saint Martin had to be completely recreated because they were just in such bad shape. But the Christ that was on that side, and then on the north side is Saint Denis, because he's facing north towards the Basilica of Saint Denis. Both of those were just restored. But one thing they found in there was when they looked at it, there was the nails, they were cross-shaped nails. So the top of the nail was like a little cross.
They were on brand.
I know. It's so amazing. I mean, again, we're talking 19th century, like 1860.
Wow.
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 So, and then they have these turrets at the end of it when you look, and I'll put pictures on my website. And I've done so many videos. I've been doing a monthly video on Sunday on YouTube, just walking around. And so I'll put links to all of those. And if you're on my newsletter, last couple weeks ago, I did one that had just links to all the times we've talked about Notre Dame on the podcast and all the videos I've done. But these turrets are quite complex. They are very wide. And so they literally said they had to get the tiniest and thinnest workers to do it when it got to a certain point, because there was so little room between the scaffolding and putting in these pieces of the turrets. They had to basically get their tiniest people working.
Wait, so they had little people in there?
No. But they just had the worker that was basically the skinniest worker they had. I'm going to imagine it as Oompa Loompas. He's just a Oompa Loompa. I don't think so. But they was like, could you just see that? They're probably just like Jacques Pierre, because he's, this like little skinny guy. Jacques Pierre, get up there. Put in the last piece.
Jacques Pierre.
I don't know. But on these, it also has, when you see the picture of these, it's like these and turret. So it's like this long, cone. So basically think of an ice cream cone turned over. And then on it, it has like 192 hooks on the south side. The north one has 272 hooks. And then they have chimeras and gables and all of these things. All of those little individual pieces were done separately. And then they would attach them with these doweling systems and epoxy glue and everything. And so because otherwise it would be so fragile to try to pull those up in a crane. And so that's why you had the Oompa Loompas up there.
That's so cool.
It wasn't Oompa Loompas. And we mean no offense by that. Sorry, Oompa Loompas. They're just busy making chocolate. They're working on that. But what's also I thought was really interesting is they then have to patina all of this because the top of it is very clean and white and beautiful because it's new stone and it's cleaned. And then the bottom of the church is all gray and dirty. So they actually are patina all of it so they could hopefully get it to match. But eventually they just need to, power wash and clean the sides, which they will probably do after it opens December 8th. It doesn't mean they're done. The project will probably continue into 2026 because they need to do work on the buttresses, and then they're going to do all this work on the outside, and then all this work on the garden and adding in like some 150 trees and all this stuff. So they have a lot of work to do. So once it reopens, it doesn't mean they're done. So you will not be strolling in the back, beautiful park under the cherry blossoms for probably quite a few years.
Oh man, that was my favorite place to take pictures.
I know they're so beautiful, but just imagine how great it's going to be when we get to finally go back there. But it's amazing. I cannot believe that we're like, less than 140 days and we'll be back inside Notre-Dame.
I can't wait to see it. It's going to be beautiful.
I'll be first thing in the morning holding Philippe's hand.
Frolicking through.
Frolicking underneath the stained glass windows. But we'll do another one about the inside because there's so many interesting things about the inside. And there's going to be so many new things like new furniture and a new reliquary for the Crown of Thorns, which I'm not down with at all, what I've seen. They're changing the way you're going to come into the church. They're changing the way you walk through the church. They're changing some of the chapels. So we'll go over all of that stuff in the next few months as well.
All right, guys. Well, there you have it. And head on over to ClaudineHemingway.com to learn more, and we'll hear from you next week.
Thanks for listening today, guys. If you're interested in learning more about Claudine, her tours, history, and the beautiful photographs that she posts all over Instagram, tune into her website, ClaudineHemingway.com.